Hey everyone, welcome back. You are listening to 한국어천재 on TBS EFM 101.3 in Seoul and the surrounding areas. You're hanging out with me, Kayla, and it is Monday, which means I got Chef Matthew in the house. Hi, Matthew.
Woohoo!
That was such a happy woo, but it really is a happy day because
really
Matt is back.
Mm-hmm.
How you feeling?
Good. I'm back on my feet again.
Yep. Is everything working properly now? You can walk again and all that?
All the pieces are back into place. Nothing is in Subisa right now. Everything has come back from the shop. Yes.
I love it. We had a great time last week talking about Jeju.
Right. And, so we talked about the regional foods of Korea. We did Jeju-do last week. And we are going to move on to another region today. But before we go on to today's region, let's just do a quick recap of Jeju-do.
Yeah. So what were some of the things? We talked a lot last week about the culture of it as well, because the culture really affects the food and just the general mindset of Korea, the weather, but also the geography of being like primarily volcanic rock.
Sure.
And so that limited like growing any sort of rice or grains kind of out there.
And then other things, they really thrived in that climate and in that geography as well. Things like citrus fruits. And then you have the seafood. And then one thing we didn't get to talk about that I wish we did because it's one of your favorite things, Kozari.
I love Kozari.
Right.
Kozari is like a fern.
It's a fern.
I was gonna say I don't know specifics about ferns. I'm not a fern expert, but I would say it is probably there's a restaurant, can't 홍보 it, sorry, but like there's a restaurant out there that has some amazing kozari, and every time I go to Jeju I have to eat it. Like I will wait in line.
It's so good. And if you're weirded out by it, and that's natural because you don't really eat ferns that often. Think of it as a mushroom. It basically has the same kind of meaty flavor profile that mushrooms do.
That's true. Yeah. And it was so delicious. So, and unfortunately, we didn't have time last week, but not to worry because a lot of these foods you can, encounter in other places here. And we're going to be moving on today to one of my favorite cities in Korea. I absolutely love where we're going next. And where is that?
We're going a little north. Now we're hopping onto the mainland to Busan.
Oh my god, I love Busan. 저 다음 생에서는 부산에서 태어나면 좋겠어요. I really love Busan and I would love to be born there someday.
Sure.
That is such a great vibes. It's just chill. It's
and
you know
what's great is that honestly, you probably don't even have to wait until your next lifetime. It's so close. My wife, she worked down in Busan for a couple of years. Just a few years ago. Actually, when we first started dating, we were dating long distance for the first couple of months, and it was great because for me, it was an excuse to go down to Busan a couple times a month. And honestly, that I think that was one of the things that really brought us even closer together was the fact that we got to explore this beautiful city with all this wonderful food together.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing, you guys. I tend to head down now that I have a friend who has an apartment right on the beach. I go down to Busan usually about once a month now, and it's mainly for the food. I'm not joking. I go for the food all
absolutely.
the time. It is so delicious here. And the thing is, before we even dive into all the food here, I think it would be fun to kind of give you guys a quiz and see what your general knowledge is before we really give you any hints or tips here. So we've got another quiz coming up this time on Busan. Let's take a listen.
돼지국밥은 부산의 대표적인 음식 중 하나입니다. 다음 중 돼지국밥과 관련이 없는 음식 재료를 고르세요. 1번 돼지내장 2번 들깨 3번 새우젓 4번 고사리
Oh my. Okay, so we're talking about one of my, just general kukbap, so good.
Right.
But 돼지국밥 here is, what would we translate that as? Like pork and rice soup?
Pork and rice soup. I mean, honestly, it is the original Korean fast food as far as I'm concerned. It's basically you get a really rich, meaty pork broth, big chunks of pork in there, and then you put the rice directly into the soup. Not going to mention the other ingredients because it's going to give away the answer to the quiz. But that's the basic gist of this dish. It's so simple and it's so delicious.
It's delicious. So we're going to, I guess, translate 돼지국밥 as pork and rice soup for this part here. And we're saying here in the quiz that it is the representative dish. 대표적인 kind of means like a representative. 대표 is like a rep, I guess you could say. So
Right.
대표적인 like is the adjective describing it. It's the representative dish of Busan. And there were 4 ingredients here that were come out, but one of them has nothing to do with it. So can you read the 4 options one more time for us, Matt?
So number 1 was 돼지 내장. So those are the innards of the pig, the guts of the pig.
Okay, and those are delicious.
Right.
I've had 내장. It's yummy. I love it.
And number 2 is 들깨. 들깨. These are perilla seeds.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest 들깨 fan. I will
They're
not
very
lie.
fragrant.
Yes.
I think it's one of those things. It has just such a floral scent to it
Yeah.
that it's very easy for it to be love it or hate it. It's
Yeah.
so strong. Every dish that it's part of, it really just takes it over.
That's so true. And this third one, though, I'm a huge fan of.
새우젓. 새우젓. So 새우 is shrimp. 젓 or 젓갈 refers to kind of salted and fermented. So 새우젓 are the salted fermented brine shrimp.
It is so good, but I made the mistake of eating it by itself once. Highly recommend not doing that. It is salty.
It's kind of almost like Parmesan cheese, like Parmigiano, like real Parmigiano. It's very intense and salty on its own, but when it's part of something, it really just brings out those very savory flavors.
Yeah.
It makes the pork taste more like pork.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's delicious.
Right.
And then finally, this number 4 here, actually, you guys should be familiar with it now. We're talking about Kozari, right?
Right. We were just talking about this about a minute and 40 seconds ago, and if you don't remember this, then shame on you. But in case you weren't paying any attention, Kozari are fern. They're a type of fiddlehead fern, also known as bracken.
That's a terrible name. I like fiddlehead fern better.
Bracken. It sounds like a Scottish monster.
I reject bracken as a name. But so between those 4 ingredients there, the innards, the perilla seeds, the salted shrimp, and the fern, there is one of those that is not in 돼지국밥. And so I'm curious to see which one you guys think it is. Take your time, send us your answers, and we are going to take some time to kind of break down this 돼지국밥 as we
Yes.
do it. Give me the background on it.
So like we were saying earlier, this is a 대표적인 음식. And when we use that word 대표적인, like it's representative, you use that for a lot of different things, right? Like you talk about Olympic athletes being like 대표 선수. They represent the country.
Yeah.
And 돼지국밥, I think, is one of those dishes that I think immediately comes to mind. And because it's been part of this region for so long, especially Busan, but also part of the larger Gyeongsang province. However, an interesting thing is as you move north or outwards from Busan into the rest of Gyeongsang province, like areas like Daegu, you get less and less 돼지국밥 and you get more 순대국밥.
I'm mad fan of 순대국밥. Like that for me is my 4 a.m. on my way home. Don't want to go home on an empty stomach. So I get some 순대국밥. And I had a 24-hour one near my house when I lived back in a different area of Seoul. It was fantastic. I would go in there all the time. There was also 한우국밥 as well that I've had. They also sold it there. Magnificent. So good.
Right. It's great. And especially 순대국밥, they'll eat it a lot as a 해장국, kind of like a hangover soup.
Yeah.
Although, actually, I think I know the reason why you don't like 들깨 in yours is because, actually, did you know if you put it in there, it doesn't get rid of your hangover?
Well, that would certainly attribute to it. I
Do you
would.
know why?
Why is that?
들깨 넣으면은
Why?
술이 들깨.
Get out! Get out of here! I don't want to have you on the show anymore. 되게 good.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
But back to the dish itself. Interesting note. This dish actually has its roots in samgyetang.
Really?
Yes. So this is basically essentially the kind of the pork version of samgyetang. So minus the insam, minus the techu. And then it just uses regular rice instead of chapsal.
Okay.
But they both kind of have their DNA rooted in a similar sort of like cooking style.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and also obviously no chicken in this as well.
No,
We're talking
it's
about pork here.
yes.
So we actually got a lot of messages in now. 잠제노 says, 들깨 Oh, okay, so that would be number 3 or 2. We've got some people thinking number 2. 인준 할미 says 들깨 새우젓 빠지면 섭섭. 순대국밥에 다대기 불어서 먹고 싶다. Oh yeah, I know. I feel like that too as well. But there 인준 할미 is saying, oh yeah, you can't have it without the 들깨 and without the 새우젓. So obviously it's not one of those two there. I think it's Chung, maybe Chung. I'm going to say Chung.
I think I know who this is.
Is this Yujong?
Yeah, this is Yujong.
Yujong, hi. Yujong says, Kozari is for 육개장. Oh, Yujong, I feel like knows what she's talking about here. 잠재nu says, Kozari. Oh, we got that. And finally, we got a message from 5337님. It says, 따뜻한 국물에 소주 한 잔. 깍두기 생각나요. 정답은 4번 고사리용. That's right.
correct.
맞아요. 4번은, yep, it is number 4, 고사리, the bracken,
yes.
or the fiddlehead fern. 우리 커피 쿠폰 보내드리겠습니다. 5337님. Thank you so much for all your messages, everyone. Big 큰 박수, 짝짝짝. But that's right. There's no ferns in this one.
No, there is not. I mean, they would go delicious in them. I see nothing wrong with it. Just not traditional at all.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about before when we had mentioned Jeju. When I go to Jeju, there is a very famous place for their like 육개장 there, and they put kozari in it, and it just changed my life. Honestly, it's probably my top 5 favorite foods of all time.
And the one that they have in Jeju is a little bit different than what you find on the mainland as
Correct.
well, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite as red, piping, spicy hot.
Yeah.
It's much meatier. It's much more savory.
It's like a, I want to say for that, it's more like a juk kind of feeling.
Right.
It kind of is very thick. And so, yeah, that's what's the difference here is we don't have any kozari in a 돼지국밥.
No.
And so I feel like, if you guys ever want to give it a try here, I feel like it's one of those basic staples that most people can get along with.
Absolutely.
It's not too spicy. It's
No,
anything.
no.
It's just very... Like you said, a lot of people use it as a hangover soup
Right.
or things like that here. 현지 Che says, 깍두기 국물도 국밥에 떨어서 먹으면요. Why this is the egg yolk so much here. 맛있는데. 맛있죠. I like 깍두기 as well. What for our listeners here, 깍두기, what could we describe that as?
So 깍두기 is a kimchi, but it's made from radish. And as a result, because of the way that, the natural flavor of the radish, it's like a little spicier and it's crunchy. It's a little bit more refreshing. And it goes really well with things like 국밥 because like when you bite into it, right, it's this kind of cooling cube of like, tanginess that kind of cuts through the richness. So, when you see things like 국밥, 설렁탕 as well, you'll see, and things like 곰탕, you'll tend to see 깍두기 being served with a lot of these rich, meaty soups.
They're so delicious here. I'm normally not a big radish fan, not gonna lie, but when you eat things like this, I feel like it just kind of cuts that flavor.
Right. I think, I'm completely with you right there. I'm not the biggest 무 fan either. Like when it comes to things like 조림, like I'll let my sister eat like the 무,
조림,
and
yeah.
I'll take the other things. But when it comes to 깍두기, it's its own thing.
It's so good, yeah. And so I feel like there are so many things we could talk about for Busan in terms of just the 돼지국밥, but there are a lot of other foods that we associate with Busan in the Gyeongsangdo area as well. I feel like the one I often see, and it's definitely things I see on the streets as well, is the hotdog
Right,
truck.
the 씨앗 hotdog.
Oh my gosh, you guys know how Aryan and I love talking about hotdog? This is where my love of hotdog began, in Busan. I was in Busan and I discovered a hotdog truck and they put, I think it was pumpkin seeds
Right.
in it, and it also changed my life. I'm telling you about foods that changed my life. And it was so delicious that I think for the rest of my trip, I ordered one a day.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the way to do it. Okay, so if you've never had hotdog before, it's kind of like the perfect intersection of like the pancake and the donut and basically every sort of like kind of like crispy fried pastry you can imagine. It has all the best qualities of all these things, right?
Exactly.
It's
And
fried in oil.
Portable.
It's portable. It has a filling in there. And in the case of 씨앗 hotdog, well, let's start from the beginning. So basically, it like the name it implies, it's a type of duck in a sense, because it's something that's pan-griddled. It's not completely made out of rice flour, but oftentimes it's a combination of rice flour and regular wheat flour.
Yeah.
And it's yeasted, which is very interesting as well. You don't tend to see a lot of other things that are yeasted like this.
Yeah. And I was going to say, hotdog is fairly, when I always think of yeast, I always think of yeast rising a lot. But hotdog is usually served fairly thin, though,
fairly
right?
thin, yeah. And the thing is that it's also squished down as you do it. So like the yeast gives it that very like, bready kind of flavor, but the rice flour gives it the nice chewiness. Inside, it's filled with like this molten sugar cinnamon combination. But the thing that makes Busan style special, 씨앗 호떡, is that it has seeds in it. Mm-hmm. You mentioned pumpkin seeds, but you'll also see sunflower seeds as well as peanuts sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll see chopped walnuts in there. So what they'll do is they'll kind of slit it open and fill it all with these seeds, and then they serve it to you in a little paper cup, and that makes all the difference.
It does. It blows my mind. Hwani Kim here says, 씨앗 호떡. 해바라기 씨앗 아닌가요? 해바라기 씨앗도 있는데 해바라기 is sunflower, so 해바라기 씨앗 is talking about sunflower seeds. 씨앗 is seeds. And so 그런 것도 있는데 제가 보고 봤을 때는 pumpkin seeds, 호박 씨앗.
호박 씨앗,
yeah, that was in there.
땅콩, 호두. You'll see a lot of the different trucks. They'll have their own kind of combination spin on it, right? And they're all delicious. And the thing is that I think when it comes to regional dishes of Busan, this definitely might be the most Instagrammable.
Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It is just a molten ball of goodness.
And GBD, golden brown and delicious.
I love that. GBD. Mm-hmm. We're naming that's going to be Matt's hashtag here. But if we could give them one more like kind of food that you could associate with Busan, what do you think that would be?
So one thing, if you're traveling down to Busan for your first time, this is one that you have to try because it's hard to find this dish outside of Busan. And I would say that'd be Mirimian. Mirimian. So it literally translates to wheat noodles, which is, it sounds boring, but it's really not.
No,
it's anything
good.
But. They're delicious. This is a cold noodle dish. It has its roots in naengmyeon. And one of the reasons why it's so interesting is because, like I said, it's difficult to find outside of Busan. So during the holidays, when all the kind of Busan natives, they go back home to visit their families, there is a line out of the door of all these Mirimian places because they just can't find it anywhere else.
Yeah, I would say that I do not see that here in Seoul. Have you found a place in Seoul that sells Mirimian?
No, I can't say I have.
I was going to say, if we knew where one was, but most of the Koreans didn't, that would be amazing. I have not seen one in my time living here. And so I highly recommend, if you get to go down to Busan, it's a very refreshing dish. And like you said, it's very kind of reminiscent of naengmyeon.
Yeah, it's chewy. It's got that nice refreshing edge to it. Yeah, it's fantastic. And like I said, I think Korea's love of cold noodles is something that's very underrated.
Yeah, and I would say there's so many other foods here. Our 작가님 had mentioned to me that Busan has a very specific style of like omuk. Is that true? Like what is?
Yeah, so like Busan style omuk is something that's very famous. Like right, like and I think it's one of those things too. Like you see, it's funny because at the KTX station, there's like places that sell Busan style omuk, and there's a line out the door. But what's funny is that because omuk is something that's very easily packaged, it is something you can really find in Seoul very easily.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, right? Like when dad goes down to like Busan for a business trip, he has to bring up some omuk. It's just that thing that you do.
Yeah.
It's just so intertwined with the identity of Busan.
It's so interesting that like each region of Seoul has something kind of special about them, which is why I love being able to kind of dive in depth and take these different regions and cover some like regional things that if you come to Korea, you gotta go there and try them sometime. Make sure you check these out. But thank you, Matt, so much for always kind of breaking it down nice and easy for us.
Oh man, are we out of time already?
Already, it happens so fast. Like every single time, I feel like we just end up jibber jabbering and having a good time. But don't you guys worry, Matt's coming back next week with another region, right?
That's right.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you next week. And thank you everyone else for joining us here on 한국어천재. But unfortunately, we are out of time for today. 네, 오늘 한국어천재는 여기까지입니다.